Okay, got a Serbian here. E4, I will play the French. Who knows if the people asking for the French are still here, but we'll play it. And oh my goodness, it couldn't have been better timed. Because that opening is exactly what you want to see as a French player. No, Kepler, that's against C65, against the Caro-Kann. So we'll bring the knight out. I like C6. It's an amazing structure against the bishop, but honestly, I think there's more important things to do, like you get castle. We could go bishop here, but I think it's a race to get the e-file here. That's the way I feel. And that's the case with a lot of these positions. It's very much, you know, if he doesn't castle there and I get to check him, that's uncomfortable for him. I'm going to do something here that I really like doing, which is h6. And you'll notice that I've taken both of these squares away from the bishop. So that bishop is kind of doomed to a life on one of those two squares. It can't even go to b2. I don't think it's truly going to be happy this game, or at least that's what I'm hoping. And I love to see that move, because now I'm going to play c6. And the bishop on b3 is not going to be a part of this game. Like, unless white plays c4 or c3 to bring the bishop back, that bishop is doing 0 from b6 or b3. And the knight also, I just went over in a previous Slowbrah game how this pawn structure is ultra effective against this knight. And you see it on display right here. So both of these pieces are really, really poorly placed. I think that white might already be in a situation where I want to say you almost need to play something like that. Because if you don't, I think black develops really nicely. Rook here, knight there, queen c7, and there's just nothing that these pieces can do. They're all going to be like stuck right there. Can't go any further. So I'm happy to play c6 here. What move am I truly interested in doing next? This one. h3 and back. Because if I stay pinned on this knight, he can't move into that square. I'd like to go here to stop that move, but it doesn't make sense to block my bishop in. And you'll see, even though this move, by the way, it doesn't look very good because he's moving the same piece again, I have to give my opponent some credit, because if he left it on c3, it would have been even worse. So I think it's a nice move. I do. It also has the idea of bishop f4, which I do not like allowing here. I want to make sure we stop that. So I'm going to stop it with one of two moves. Queen here, or bishop here, just to give him another threat to deal with. I like queen c7. Queen c7 is looking good. He might slowly be rerouting his bishop. Push the g-pawn. Chilled living. You never ever want to push pawns in front of your king like this. Push one pawn for an escape square, but that's about it. Your pawns are the safest and best placed like this. You need an escape square, maybe one of them gets pushed up, but man, you gotta be really careful playing moves like g5, especially for no reason. This is unprovoked. If I can prevent this move with g5 or queen c7, always choose the one that handles your problems by moving a piece. Bishop here, I don't love knight e5, so I'm definitely going to go queen c7 here. Stopping this. Now, his knight e2 move, okay, I was going to say, it's either for him to play the c-pawn, or it was for this. Him playing this move tells me exactly what he's intending. He wants to play that. Now, bishop h3 looks tempting, but after the rook goes here, you realize, okay, the rook kind of wanted to go there. So did I gain anything from bishop h3? I'm not sure, actually. I'm really not sure. g3 by him is also very weakening. The bishop all the way over here, some weak light squares here. I'm looking at bishop g4 the most. I like this one. Seems to put the most pressure on the position. Whereas bishop, yeah, as I said, bishop h3 kind of forces the rook where it wants to go. Knight e5 is covered. So we're getting all of our pieces out, hopefully in a good order. Bishop out before the knight, of course. Queen out first to stop knight e5. In this position, I think there's only one move that really makes sense to me, and it's that. You know, he could play knight here, but that kind of ruins his plan. He wants to play bishop there. King up. It looks like maybe queen here is interesting, but you know, he can move the rook. He can also strangely bring this knight back to g1 to play h3. And queen d7 is awkward because it blocks my knight and it allows knight e5. I don't really know how I feel about that. But I'm not really, if my opponent plays well in the next couple moves, I'm not really going to be able to permanently prevent his bishop f4 idea. To be quite honest with you, the only way I'll be able to prevent it is actually by playing g5. That's the only way to stop the idea 100%. Other than that, it looks like bishop f4 will happen. It's not the end of the world either. I think we just bring the pieces out normally. Queen d3. Nice looking move. I tell you, chilled living's move g5 becomes so tempting here because stopping this piece to f4 would just be so satisfying. I know that if he doesn't have bishop f4, he's going to be wondering what the hell to do. But knight d7 is definitely the better move. So we're at a crossroads. Do you play the position or do you play the opponent? The answer is definitely, in fact, always the position. This is not a situation get creative. This is a knight d7 and chill situation. Keep it simple. And actually, after this, it's another reminder, you know, taking seems to only help the pieces. Our plan is probably just going to be rook e8. You want to take me? Go ahead. And then if you play knight f4, it'll be my turn again. So think of it like bishop f4, takes, rook e8, it's white's turn. Or bishop f4, rook e8, takes, knight f4, and it's black's turn. Big difference. Happily take back. Getting a rook to the open file here. This is why I was saying earlier, bishop h3 made no sense. He's happy to move to that square anyway. So now I'm really starting to think, because move c5, I've got all my pieces on like pretty good squares. The move c5 becomes ultra tempting. I'm threatening c4, and if he takes, knight takes, his queen is tethered to that knight. So where does the queen actually go? Right, he has to go to like c3. It's the only square. But then we start to think about knight e4, and you know, it's not that easy for the queen to stay protecting that knight. So this move with c4 as a threat becomes extremely tempting, and probably the move we're going to go for. Yeah, I think I like c5 here. Is rook takes knight an option? It's definitely an option. I can't say it's that inspiring. The knight does seem like it can be defended, but my position is good enough here that even that might be good. Rook takes knight. You know, rook takes. There's rook e3, king g2. We can bring the knight into e4, but I don't know. It definitely feels like it's a really interesting move. Definitely feels a little unnecessary. c5 is easier to accomplish and kind of has a nasty... Like, the only thing I can see after c5 is c4. That's like the only idea. But even that, I feel like it should benefit me. So I just like this move too. This move sacks material, and so then you have to justify it, whereas c5 I don't think needs any justification. Because I'm not losing any material. I'm still enjoying my position after c5. But rook takes e2, maybe it'll be the next move. He takes rather quickly. Go ahead and take back and attack the queen. Remember, bishop takes knight is going to win the game unless he stays guarding it. e3 is not an option. Yes, you can play bishop takes here, but at this point, I can even take the queen. So I think you have to go queen to c3. And that's where I was saying, okay, after queen c3, next move for us, knight e4. Queen has to guard that knight again. So now the queen has to guard the knight. Knight's on e4, only squares queen e3. But we have the rook lined up on e3. So you guessed it, we'll be able to move this knight maybe to g5 to hit the knight. Knight takes g3. Tons of like very, very good knight moves to do there. Okay, let's continue with this as we mentioned, right? No need to take this at any point. So start with this. Okay, I should probably at least take a moment and calculate this. So first thing to remember, he's up a piece right now. So if I take here, he takes here. He's already up a piece. So if I then continue with knight takes knight, I'm only evening the stakes. So I even things out. Knight takes knight check. King goes up. And then I don't know. I'm not actually doing anything there. I can play knight takes bishop. Pawn takes. Bishop takes knight. Takes. Knight to d4 check. King back. Knight takes c2, but he can trade the rook here, and all I do is win a pawn out of that whole thing. Not to mention, if he takes with the c pawn, I might not even win a pawn. So, I'm not impressed. So, queen takes here allows us to continue with all those same ideas from earlier, but of course, I had to at least give it some thought. So this is going to force queen to e3. And after queen e3, to keep guarding this knight, then it's dealer's choice, right? I have the rook from e8 hitting the queen. Where do you guys think is the most destructive knight move? Sometimes this is an area where you could easily mess up when you just like have the most choices possible. So where should black put the knight in that position? I think the two main considerations are knight takes g3 and knight g5. So which one do we like better? Maybe our opponent won't even play queen e3, but certainly expect him to. So there's a rather unusual concept which I'm about to endeavor to explain. So whenever you have a situation where you're about to win sizable material, especially when there's a queen involved, meaning you're probably going to win their queen, and it's about what material you offer them in exchange. There's kind of an important principle, and you want to try to find the middle, the balance, really perfectly. So on one side, you have how much material are you threatening to win, or could you possibly win with your move? And on the other side, you have how much material are you offering your opponent in exchange for their queen? Because this usually happens when there's a queen involved. And you want to try to find the middle ground where you're not offering them a lot of value for their queen, but you're still trying to threaten to win a ton of material. So for example, knight takes g3. It actually threatens to win maybe the most material. Because, we've got like this knight hanging. It takes a pawn in front of the king. It's the most destructive. The queen is being hit. The f3 knight is still being hit as well. If the queen goes to f4, there's knight takes e2 and queen f4 winning everything. Knight takes g3 looks insanely destructive. Queen here, knight takes, bishop takes f3. There might be a queen checkmate coming over. But here's the thing. After knight g3, white can play knight takes g3. And then rook takes e3, rook takes e3. And then you're like, wait a minute. I gave away a knight and a rook, and I got a queen and a pawn. Now, you're of course winning in that position. You're winning. But you've given your opponent probably too many pieces or points of material on our little scale here. You went too far in this direction. So I want to go more in this direction. Knight g5, the maximum that your opponent could get in value for their queen would be, let's say, knight takes, rook takes, pawn takes, takes. They only get a rook. Queen takes here, they only get a rook. And if they move their queen away, we'll take the knight and we'll take the rook. So knight g5 hits this scale pretty much perfectly in the center, or even a little bit more on this side, which is ideal. We're offering almost no value for the queen. We're offering only a rook, but we're still threatening to win a ton of material. Whereas knight g3 offers way too much value to our opponent for their queen. Our position is too good for us to cash in by giving away a rook and knight and only getting a queen and a pawn. That's better for us, but that's not good enough. So knight g5 is definitely the move here. Want to make sure you're not offering too much value to your opponent for their bad position. Knight takes, don't really do much. If the queen moves anywhere, knight takes here and knight takes there, we'll be up a rook at the minimum. And yeah, queen here even falls into knight h3. Queen here, knight f3, queen here, knight f3. Queen c3, we would just do this, and we would even win probably the knight at the end of the position as well, or something close to it. And yeah, knight e5 would just take, attack the queen, and again, knight f3, knight e1 is happening. So it's actually in these positions where you're almost, the way I approach this position is I almost expect my opponent to want to sack their queen, because keeping the queen on the board, just, you're completely lost. So you have to expect that your opponent in these tough situations with discovered attacks on the queen is going to be maybe interested in sacking. And if they're looking to sack their queen, I want to offer them the worst possible offer, value-wise, in exchange for the queen. And to me, knight takes g3 offers way too much value, considering I know my opponent is going to be interested in sacking their queen anyway, because the pressure is unrelenting here. If I know they're, like, basically, if I know my opponent's on the market shopping their queen around, trying to sell it, I'm not going to be offering top dollar. I'm going to hold my cards close to my chest. Rook and a knight is too much, overpriced. Okay, and here we go. There's that sacrifice we were expecting. It was check, so there was no way for me to throw in knight takes f3 or anything like that. I don't think I don't think king g2 is gonna help you out there, bud. Oof. That's gonna be a tough one there. Bishop h3. There's king h1. I'm not exactly delivering a mate there, so we'll start by taking this one with a check. King g1, I have knight here, but he's certainly gonna go king f1 to guard the knight. And I think we can probably set up a very unique checkmate there. Yeah, king here. I was gonna go knight e4, just because I figured if this knight moved like knight f4, then this is just a very unique checkmate. Didn't quite get to do it. Yeah, so knight g5 and knight g3. It's two moves that both kind of like, they both do a lot of damage. But if you look at, for example, if you look at like what the engine would think of these two decisions, knight g5 is a pretty serious favorite, like a very noticeable favorite. And it's not because it necessarily wins more material. This, if white saves the queen in both of these lines, moves the queen away, both of them win maybe just as much material. Or you could see how both of them are pretty nasty. But knight g5 and knight g3 differ in the lines where white gives up the queen. And you notice the biggest difference. So knight g5 is preferred there. And it's possible I should have played the c5 move earlier. So let's have a look. I only noticed it here. Queen d3, knight here. And then it was bishop f4. And in this moment, c5 is already a decent move. I played rook e8. Right? And he played just rook e1, and then we went with it. But it's quite possible that c5 should have been played already. He played here, and now, once I had all my pieces mobilized, just like any good chess game, I finally was like, oh, it's time for c5. And here's rook takes e2 that one of the chat members mentioned. And I said, and I was honest, I was like, I really like rook e2. It looks really good. But if I'm honest, I'm going to choose c5 because it's safe. I know I can play the move c5, and I don't risk anything because I'm not sacrificing anything. It's a way to improve my position, and I'm not giving up any material. But damn if rook e2 wasn't tickling my fancy after it was mentioned, because takes, we're in this nasty pin here. King g2, rook e3. Okay, we'll play knight e4. You're not immediately winning, but it's just a good position. I don't know, it's tough to explain it. Just bring the knight in, bring the other knight in. White's pieces do not defend very well here. But c5 is a very good move, definitely. Just doesn't sack anything. And c4, this was the one I was expecting him to play, but him taking all of a sudden makes my move even better. Just because the queen is in serious trouble here. So there's the French, but maybe not the best example. It's just, I can't change what my opponents are doing to me. We got a 1250 here playing e4, bishop c4. Absolutely